Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. When it comes to EVE news, I didn't see that much, but CCP Rise on Twitter did tweet some interesting changes that they are planning for the game, such as a nerf to the ECM drones, which will now have a 20-second timer, but will only lock you out for 5 seconds. So that's definitely another nerf to ECM, which has already been hit very hard, basically by allowing you to keep the ECM target that the target that is ECMing you, that will always be remain targetable. So quite another massive change to ECM, which is gonna further nerf it. Next to that, I think that they're also planning to do some changes to the production of Triglavian ships. Very interesting there. I personally hope that if the long-term plan is indeed to make them an all-out race for the game, that we'll end up seeing blueprint originals for the Tech 1 ships, and then Tech 2 invention, faction variants, and all of that good stuff, so that you can have a baseline of Tech 1 in the same way that we have Tech 1 right now for everything else in the game. Anyways, let's get started. I think, as always, we'll start with a quick look at the new Eden store, where there is a sale this week. It is for the Ace of Pot Hunter skin, so you've got one for the Gila. I think that on the Gila it looks pretty good. It is not symmetrical, if I'm... Oh, or is it on the Gila? Is it symmetrical? Yeah, it actually looks... No, it's not. Alright, the white part is definitely not symmetrical. You can see that at the back there, but it looks pretty good. The Worm of Ace, the Worm also has the skin, and then over here the Rattlesnake. There's also the entire bundle for all 3 ships. Almost 500 plex. It is still pretty expensive, so this is really just a tiny little sale for a very specific skin. Who knows, perhaps at some point, of course, CCP might take this one out of the rotation. That might be part of the reason why they are putting up a sale at this point. Anyways, let's move on to the market. This is why you are all here, of course, and we will start as always with plex. Gonna be at 230. Like that, and let's go price history. You can see that we dropped down to less than 4 million for a little bit, and then we've got some upwards momentum. The real question, I think, is going to be what happens when the 20-day moving average and the 5-day moving average will meet just above 4 million ISK on the chart. Will we continue to go up, or will we start to decline? Hold on that price range? I think for now my bet would be on holding on for a little bit, and then the market deciding to go back down from 4 million ISK. I'm not entirely sure by that, but I do think that this 4.5 million spike in early April will have been the top for this year. I might be wrong on that, of course. If we take a look at Jita, someone just came in with a couple plex at 4.1 million. Most are being sold at 4,180,000 ISK, buyers just above 4 million. But if we go to the player on trade hubs, you can see that sellers go down to 4.1 million and buyers remain in the same region, basically 50,000 ISK from each other. So very, very narrow margin at the moment. Basically a sign of some hesitation in the market, I would say, and you can't really tell what the current trend is, which is normal on a chart like this, right? We just went down and then we're going up a little bit, but we're getting very close to that 20-day moving average. What is the market going to do? You can't really tell by seeing what Jita is doing and what the player on trade hubs are doing. Basically the difference between these two is, of course, the sales tax, and this seems to be very much in line with both of these trying to compete for the very same market, not knowing exactly where they're going. So yeah, plex, a bit of hesitation, a slight uptick in the last week or so. Where will we go from here? That is the real question, of course. For the multiple pilot training certificate, we are still below 2 billion ISK, which for me is an indication that plex is not likely to spike up much more, because the multiple pilot training certificates for 30 days game time are still cheaper than plex at just above 4 million ISK. Currently selling for slightly less than 2 billion ISK. If we go to the trade hubs though, you get a little bit more of these on sale for 1,943,000,000, 44 million ISK actually. And then the buyers though, less than 1.9 billion. That is a very big difference. If you want some trading and it is not for your main toon, your one toon on an account, then I think a buy order for multiple pilot train certificates right now makes most sense if that's the way that you want to basically plex an account or have a skill queue running. Still definitely shy of the 2 billion, which is the current price for plex itself. Next up, the skill extractor, same little bounce, but this one bouncing off of 450 million ISK, of course. And again, that same thing, 5-day moving average going up a little bit, 20-day moving average continuing to go down. What will happen when those two meet? I personally think we'll have a bit of hesitation, right? A flat time there, and then we'll start our slowdown trend towards the summer. That is my expectation. 463 million ISK for the sellers, 451 for the buyers, and Jita again goes up to 472 million, so that's like a 9 to 10 million difference between the two, 2%, something like that, for the tax difference there. So makes a lot of sense here that this is basically the current price range. Both Jita and the player owned trade hubs are competing again in that very same realm, not really showing any indication. What would usually happen, if you want a little bit more background on that, is that you can for instance see that on plex, if the sellers in Jita itself would go down to 4.1 million, then you could still have the player owned trade hubs needing to catch up to that move and staying at just below 4.1 million. But then you would see that pressure starting to show up in Jita 4.4, which will eventually normally drive the price down. The exact opposite can happen as well, where the prices in Jita are just going up, where the extra volume in the player-owned trade hub still needs to actually be grabbed by the market, but that the trend is quite clearly going to be up. And so there's often a bit of a predictor that you can see between what happens in Jita and what happens in the player-owned trade hubs, because those two tend to lag behind a little bit. They're definitely not fully synced at this point, and that's very, very interesting. Of course, right now we're basically on the same price in both of them. The difference between the two, of course, being the tax price. Next up, we have the injector. So the large scale injector is actually continuing on an uptrend, still at a 1-year high point of more than 950 million ISK. Sellers are coming in at 967 million ISK. Jesus, that's expensive. Almost a billion ISK for the skill injectors. And then we have the buyers coming in at 955 million ISK. That's also super expensive. And look at that here, Jita going up to 985 million ISK. That's actually a pretty wide margin between those two, right? Yep, definitely 18 million ISK or something like that. 2%, yeah, around 19. It's actually okay as well for starting to hesitate. You can see at the tail end here that we are basically flat in the last 4 or 5 days here, and not really going up that much more at this point. So very interesting situation. Large scale injectors at a 1-year high point, and here again, I'm also seeing that hesitation at the tail end between the sellers and the buyers in Jita and the player-owned trade hubs. You get a logical difference between the sell prices there. And of course, one thing that we know as well is that plex has always been a bit of a front runner before the impact on the skill injectors as well. And so now plex has peaked, and these skill injectors are peaking. So I think that at this point, we will start to see that slowdown trend. Next up, we've got the small skill injectors. Bit of hesitation here again as well. Last 4 or 5 days. Again, a very flat price, but at a 1-year high point. Currently selling for 194.5 million ISK. And the buyers of the small skill injectors are coming in at 188.5 million. Bit of margin here between the sellers and the buyers, around 6 million. And again, if we go for Jita prices, it's up to 198 million ISK to 194. That's only a 4 million mark on a 200 million though, so again we're right on our 2%, so that does make a lot of sense. And finally we've got the daily alpha injector that is going down in price, and perhaps I'm going to add this one as a canary in the coal mine at peak here early April, right around the peak of the plex market at 73.7 million ISK. Currently it's already down to 68 million for the sellers and 60.5 million for the buyers. Pretty clear peak forming here, and then we could go all the way down to like 60, even 50 to 60 million for a yearly average price here. So if this momentum holds up, I think that there is again a very good chance that we are also peaking in the large scale injectors, that we have peaked for plex, and that the rest of the market is going to start on that slow downtrend. Still a great time to sell if you have invested in these items earlier in the year. Look at the large scale injectors, 700 million to currently selling for almost a billion ISK. That is definitely not bad. Same thing with plex, basically a full year upwards here, not bad at all. Skill extractors, very much the same thing, with much better ISK values, of course, starting out at like 300 million ISK down here, ending up at 500 million ISK. Not bad, and the trade volumes are still quite reasonable to try and get your sales going, I think. So interesting times here. Let me know in the comments if you also share that belief that we are peaking, or do you think that something else is going to happen with the plex and plex related markets. Let's move on to the minerals coming in at 1120. Like that, and here I think if you took a look at the ticker, you can see that some pressure is starting to show as well. For titanium, we are trying and managing to hold on to a price of above 4.5 ISK, so up a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but it is very little, and I think the pressure will show up quite quickly. 4 ISK 73 for the sellers, 4.56 for the buyers. And then are these in the last 24 hours? No, so that's a bit of a surprise to me. Only one sell order of 1.8 billion units in the last 24 hours. Not that much new titanium coming to the market, giving us a little bit of hope that we can hold on to that price of more than 4.5 ISK on average, which is still not great, but at least you're getting some ISK for your titanium. Even historically speaking, 7 to 8, which we've seen here, is actually a really great price. 5 to 6 is actually a normal price, so 4.5, considering the rest of the mineral market, I would say is not that bad. Next up, we've got pyrite that is also holding on to its gains that it made in late December here, when we reached the bottom of almost 3 ISK. We made our way back, trying to get to 4 ISK. We're not succeeding there, but it's 3.97 for the sellers and 3.9 ISK for the buyers. Here again, also in the last 24 hours, not a lot coming in. We've got 1.4 billion ISK here, but that's already 4 days old, so we're not seeing a massive rush to try and take advantage of the current prices either. After that, we have Mexalon that is slowly edging up. Very interesting, breaking through 60 ISK and is definitely above that at this point. 63.4 for the sellers and 59.77 for the buyers. In the last 24 hours, again, look at that, only 2 new sell orders. So people do seem, let's take a quick look if the player on trade hubs are seeing some. That's 3 days ago. This 80 million, all right, at 62.99, a couple in the last 24 hours as well. But it's not the hundreds or even the billions of units that are coming in at this point outside of JITA. And I think that's good news. I think the buyers are slowly being forced up to a price above 60 ISK, which gives us some breathing room in the Mexalon market. Next up, we've got Isogen. That one is still playing with very low prices. Now, absolute bottom was less than 15 ISK. In November, at this point, we are selling Isogen for 17 ISK, buyers coming in at 16 ISK, so it's still really cheap. And then we've got Noxium for the former Isaac minerals right now. Of course, Zydrine and Megasite are definitely, normal minerals as well. So we don't have that distinction anymore. But Noxium used to be our in-between one, something that was available in Isaac, but definitely not everywhere. And lots of sources did come from Wormhole Space and 00. And look at that, not bad. Holding on to that 300 to 325 range at the moment. Still doing quite well over the entire year. Very interesting to see Noxium holding on to 312 ISK for the sellers, 297 for the buyers. They are trying to get the price down a little bit, but again in the last 24 hours, well, this is actually more reasonable. Full front page here, but then again, the volumes, 3 million units, 2 million units, is something completely different from the billions that we sometimes see rolling in the titanium market. So looks like for now the mineral market is taking a breather from those low points and is trying to hold on to their gains. Something might be a little bit different in Zydrine and Megasite though. Here is Zydrine. So the only reference point was that I saw Megasite at 497, so down 3 ISK, but below 500. That is actually very important. And here we have Zydrine also going below 500 ISK. So more pressure on this one. 492 for the sellers and 476 for the buyers. And the reason, of course, you can see here in the last 24 hours we've got 2.5 million, another 1.1, 1.8, 3 million, another 6 million units. But then yesterday we've got another 2 million units, another 1.6 million units before that, and I think here we'll have seen some sales, of course. And this is just that regular bringing in of the mining amounts that I think are for the Isaac moons right now. Just a corporation, another corporation, another corporation, another corporation. It's an activity that is very successful. I think that is definitely still making you a decent amount of ISK as well. And overall, what we're seeing here is lots of pressure on Zydrine and Megasite just from the continued available supplies in the game right now. And so we are breaking 500 ISK, which we've held down to for a couple of months. Megasite, same thing. You can see that since mid-February we have been able to stay above 500 ISK. On some days we didn't really succeed, but now the 5-day moving average has broken down and we are now selling Megasite for 497. Buyers are coming in at 473. That is definitely again a bit of margin between the two. And then to my surprise, in the last 24 hours we're not, well, to my surprise, in the last 24 hours we're not really seeing Megasite come in. So it's basically in the last week or so that again 6 million, 4 million, 3 million started to come in, driving that price back down to an even lower point. So that is not good news for the moon mining market actually, because it means that again our efficiency, our ISK efficiency goes down a bit more for those activities. But I guess it's also a sign of its popularity. Next up here we've got Morphite that is staying below 8,000 ISK, although on today's average price it's trying to get back above that. 8,157 for the sellers, 7,700 for the buyers. Again, a decent margin, and here half a front page, including 3 million units in the last 24 hours. It doesn't look like we're going to break out of this rut for Morphite anytime soon. Let's move on to the PI market, coming in at 1750. Like that, and let's get started here after a pretty strange spike up to an above average price even for a couple of days, I would say, up to 2.2 million almost. We are back down just as violently to a less than average price. So broadcast notes are now being sold for a bit over 2 million. Buyers are a bit over 1.9 million ISK. That is definitely a below average price and a pretty cheap price range for broadcast notes right now. What was this? Bit of over speculation? Some big player coming into the market, I am not entirely sure, but we do, if we remember from last week, know that this was almost across the board for the advanced PI materials, and we do see some volume spikes here. So kind of a strange situation to see that maybe 10 days later we're back to that rut for the advanced PI materials to a less than average price. For me personally, this is the chance to just keep waiting for those year low points and then try to grab a couple so that you're ready in case of another structure announcement by CCP. Next up, we've got the construction blocks, and for the refined PI materials, we've got definitely a different picture. You can see that the construction blocks have had a very bad period with below average price of less than 11,000 disc. Average 12 to 12,500 disc is the normal, I would say. And now construction blocks is back at 12,600 for the sellers, 11,400 for the buyers. It's pretty wide margin, but the sellers are back at an average price for construction blocks, which is very good news, I think, for people that want to produce that. Even though the chart looks like it's giving back a little bit of ground at the tail end in Jita, we are selling for that price. Now maybe I should look around. Perimeter goes down to 12,300 disc. We've got again that 2% difference here between the sales taxes of Jita 4.4 and a player on trade hubs, but the volumes are not that big, so this is basically decently easily absorbed by the market at this point. And I'm gonna stick to Jita right now for the average prices to try and see the movements of the market. I think if it stays like this, we might just be able to leave this open, but if we all of a sudden see like a full front page in the trade hubs, which I don't expect, then perhaps we should keep it open more. But let's move on then to the consumer electronics next. Same picture, of course, and here I should start on the chart. You can see that we're actually peaking up to a slightly above average price for the year, but back to that normal 14,000 price range, which historically speaking is the normal range for consumer electronics. You can see that this is clearly where we come from. Again, 13,500 to 14,000 is the normal price, and we're at 14,000 from the surrounding systems, but this, you know, it's one sell order in perimeter much closer, and then the rest I don't think I need to keep this filter off. 14,500 for the sellers, 13,720 for the buyers of consumer electronics. Yeah, back on an average price, maybe even a slightly above average price for the sellers, and this is for non-fuel related PI materials staging a bit of a comeback here and there. Coolants are continuing to give back their ground, but staying above average at this point. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers is a more reasonable price, I would say, for coolants, but it is definitely still, even historically speaking, a very good price for the product. So something easily produced from gas plants, very common with a very constant consumption as well, because it is tied to fuels, is still selling at 12,000 disc. That is definitely not bad, but we are past our prime, past the peak, which happened in March, up to 15 and even 16,000 disc. Enriched uranium is well, showing that same pattern. The March peak up to 16,000 disc is there as well, went back down to 14k, a bit harder to produce, so it definitely has a premium on coolants, and it's currently selling for 15,000 disc, bars coming in at 13,300. And at the tail end here you can see that we're actually slightly going upwards again after breaking 14,000 discs. So here I think that we will see, yeah, that everything is a little bit older. New orders are a bit trickier to bring into the market. This means that just a couple of players saying, you know what, I'm gonna hold off a little bit, or just in the regular routine not being able to supply what the market wants, means a slight uptick in the price again, and this is still well above average for enriched uranium, a pretty damn good price. The integrity response drones next, we have that same pattern, and then to my very much to my surprise, we are building in the daily averages to another spike. So we started off to a less than average price, 2.3 million, 2.4 million, something like that. Yep, exactly. Spike up to almost 3 million ISK, back down to 2.4 million, and now we're on our way back up. What the hell is happening here? 2.85 million for the sellers, 2.6 million for the buyers. So they have definitely been forced up. And here, is this continued speculation? It's not really on volume, so this is kind of a weird one. Perhaps I should take a quick look at, yeah, but that's not gonna have a big impact on the market there. Just two sell orders in the same range. And then here we have, yep, 2.85 million all of a sudden for the sellers. Integrity response drones, if you did your speculation buying at like 2.2 million during these low points that we can see here from time to time, you could consider this a small sell opportunity for sure. Interesting to see this back up already to an above average price even. 2.8 million is basically above the entire chart. We've got mechanical parts, a bit less pronounced of a spike up to 13k in March, having to give back that ground to 11,000 disc? The market says nope, we're gonna stay above average. 12,600 for the sellers and almost 12,000 disc for the buyers is definitely a pretty good price for mechanical parts as well. Nuclear reactors next. This could be a bit more interesting. Unfortunately, it's not as volatile as I would like. You can see that we've been doing very badly on the low end. 80,000 to 90,000 disc is a price range that we've seen quite often. Now at the tail end here, we are back up a little bit. So sellers are up to 105,000 disc. Buyers though are still down to 80,000 disc. So this means that there just isn't enough demand to really drive up the price substantially, which is quite unfortunate because I think I still have it, nuclear reactors. Let's see here if I can find them. Oh, trying to sell them. Yeah, I'm actually trying to sell those. There you go. So I bought them for less than 90,000 discs, thinking, looking at this chart, that was a good buy, probably around here somewhere, and now I'm trying to sell them for 110,000 discs just to get at least a decent amount of return on that trade. But yeah, the volatility just isn't there. On the other hand, looking at the rest of the PI market, I think that potentially we might get there at some point. So I'm gonna keep that sell order there, trying to make that sale happen. I'll show some patience. After that, we've got the organic mortar applicators, and it's the completely reverse of the integrity response drones. So we are down to less than 1 million ISK practically on the chart, just about below 1.1 million for the sellers, but 986,000 ISK for the buyers. This is one of those buy opportunities, of course. The chart is at a 1-year low. You are buying organic mortar applicators for less than 1 million ISK. That is super cheap. Definitely something to consider for your medium-term investments and for the gambling on an announcement for a structure. Robotics next. Alright, fuel related. It is a specialized PI material, so a little bit different. And here the good news is that we managed to get back above 100,000 discs. So 103,000 for the sellers, 99,000 for the buyers. Very, very narrow margin. And 100,000 discs for robotics is actually an average normal price, even historically speaking. This is one of the first PI materials, specialized PI materials that I ever made on a single planet. You can actually do that, which makes for something that you can just keep doing every day, but you only need to remove the items like once every 3-4 months or something like that if you're doing it in high sec. And as a result though, you do get something that is very stable, sells for around 100,000 disc, has always done so, and is still doing so right now. Basically a touch above average, but it's hardly noticeable. Self-harmonizing power cores going in March for that low point of 1.9 million ISK, crawling in its way back, trying to get back to that average, 2.1 to 2.2 I would call an average. Right now though, 2.1 million for the sellers and a bit above 2 million for the buyers, still below average for self-harmonizing power cores, but it's pretty obvious that if you wanted to make a purchase of that, you should have done so in March. Superconductors next, going down just a little bit, but staying in a pretty good range, I would say. 13,000 for the sellers, 12,600 for the buyers, around average or a touch above average. Again, just like construction blocks make it back, consumer electronics make it back, looking pretty good there. Then we've got the test cultures that is also trying to get out of that rut. I do think that test cultures is very tightly related to the advanced PI materials. I guess that you need a lot of them or something like that, but went to less than 7,000 discs. So obviously here again, if you wanted to stock up on these, you should have done so when the chart was below 7,000 discs. Now the sellers are at 7,777.77 ISK. That's a lot of sevens. And the buyers are up above 7,000 with 7,125. So here again also a bit of a bottom forming. And then finally we have the wetware mainframes that hasn't shown that speculative peak activity that we see in the integrity response drones and the broadcast nodes here. Nope, just basically flat below average, around 2.2 million for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers. Very interesting situation overall though. I am definitely seeing more ISK flowing in the PI market in general. Next up, advanced moon materials coming in at 28.45. like that. And let's get started as always with crystalline carbonites continuing the decline, and now the 5-day moving average is breaking through the 150 mark. At the tail end we're hesitating, but you can clearly see that we are talking 1-year lows with sellers at 150 and the buyers at 147 pretty much. So very narrow margin, but playing with super low prices. For ferrite carbide, it's the same problem. We try to get back above 150 and we're already on our way back down to those 1-year low points. So it's just not taking off. 137 for the sellers, 130 for the buyers. That is very cheap again. Another tier 1 a carbonite related item at a 1-year low point. Next up, we still have titanium carbide. That is basically bouncing off from that point, so not that long ago. Probably around 2 weeks we had 166 on the chart. Now we have 182 for the sellers and 180 for the buyers. The question is this volatile enough for active trading? I don't think so. So personally my recommendation would be to try and grab some of that really cheap stuff, but don't buy too much of it so that you can keep stocking up in case of further declines, and then be patient. Wait for your sell opportunity to show up when we go back to an above average price, which we haven't done in a long time. Here is tungsten carbide finally. That one is trying to hold on to an average price, 216 for the sellers and 200 for the buyers, with a bottom at 175 though. I would say that 250 is the normal average, so this is again too low as well. Next up, we have the metamaterials. Well, with all that pressure, photonic metamaterials is also diving down to a 1-year low point, selling for 16,000. These bars are coming in at 14,600. That's below 15,000, risk below the entire chart. Definitely another one. Let's see if I have made one purchase. No, I think I made a trade in this one before. Although I'm not entirely sure. This is definitely one that I should try and get my investment in. Considering this chart, I think that this is the right time to do so. Next up we have the plasmonic metamaterials, flat at 20k, so this one is holding on a little bit better. 20,300 for the sellers and 19,800 for the buyers. That doesn't look that good for buying as this chart, so that's a no for me. Non-linear metamaterials, same thing, holding on to 25,000 risk. That's not as pronounced. And then terahertz metamaterials as well. Alright, that's a bit of a surprise. We get lots of carbides and carbonites that are under pressure and playing with very low prices, but it's really only the photonic metamaterials here that are suffering the consequences for now. That leaves us the other advanced PI materials, fermionic condensates, breaking out a little bit, trying to get back to an average price of above 100,000 ISK. 103,000 for the sellers, 95,000 for the buyers. Here, yeah, I think that if you bought for less than 90k and you're now selling at 100k, that's 10%. It's not a great profit, but you can definitely try to sell, I think, if you really want to. If you want to basically close a trade in the advanced PI material market, then this one looks pretty good. Ferrogel, that's too flat below average, so that's a no for me. Fullerite is back down, heading for that low point, less than 900 ISK. Let's see where the buyers are at. 935 for the sellers, 890 for the buyers. It is, for your consideration, something that you could try to grab, and I believe that, yeah, I'm trying to buy these at 876 or have bought them. I'm not exactly sure at this point. Hypersynaptic fibers also staying super low, so here a slow stocking of these goods I think makes a lot of sense. Nanotransmitters up a little bit, but definitely staying very low and not enough volatility to make lots of trades in. Phenolic composites, well, here of course your trade opportunity, your buy opportunity is over. We went really low to 1650 to 1650 ISK. We're bouncing back up to 2000, back under pressure a little bit, but yeah, buyers are up to 1843 ISK for phenolic composites. That, in my opinion, does mean that well, there is continued pressure, but you should really have kept a closer eye on the market and bought early April. That's where you went for the really cheap stuff. And then finally, we have ceramic fibers that is continuing to be under pressure as well. How close to 400 are the buyers? They are at 400 ISK as well, which is the 1-year low point pretty much. So another one to keep an eye on. If we have another leg down, then it's probably time to try and grab some of these. So advanced moon materials continually under pressure. Some 1-year lows are visible as well, and I think you do need a lot of patience if you're investing in that market, which for me, I am investing in that market. I think that you can see that from my ticker. I'm trying to grab some of the really cheap stuff, but you are dependent on something changing in NASDAQ. Mostly I think some really big war, something like that, to really start to disrupt that income of an enemy before we're actually going to have a sell opportunity show up in the advanced moon materials. Next up, the Tech 2 ships, 3420. Well, with advanced moon materials this slow, that should have an impact on the Tech 2 market, and I think the good news about that is that it does keep Tech 2 ships, generally speaking, pretty cheap. Here is the Ares actually jumping up to 30 million. That is the sellers, 30.6 million, but look at that, the buyers, excuse me, are staying below 27 million or just at 27 million. So basically we've opened up a little bit of a margin here in the Ares by a bit of relisting of ships above 30 million ISK. I personally think that this is not a good thing to do at the moment, considering the advanced moon materials. It's very easy to get back to a lower price and still have I think a profit margin on the production. So I think we'll see by next week that we'll have more Ares being brought to the market, and that will drive the price back down towards that 27-28 million that we normally see. The Basilisk is under pressure at the tail end here, heading for 230 million ISK exactly for the sellers, 221 for the buyers. Personally, I'd wait for a lower bottom, but this is still well below average. Obviously the cheap Tech 2 ships because of the plentiful production at the moment of the raw materials. Cerberus heading towards that 1-year low point as well, still a ways off from the 200 million mark, but you can clearly see that we are massively under pressure at the tail end. 219 million for the sellers, 205 million for the buyers. Even despite this really low price, we're still seeing, look at the volumes in the last 24 hours, that's quite significant. Look at the margin between sellers and buyers. This I think is exactly what I'm talking about. Even at this 219 million range, they are competing with each other because they're still making ISK, and the buyers can go down to 205 million for a Cerberus and get lucky from time to time to get that really cheap one. Next up, we've got the Crow, staying around the 30 million mark, back to 31 million for the sellers, 27.6 for the buyers, though those buyers are not really willing to budge that much. Then we get the Guardian back down to well below average price. How far from 200 million are the buyers? That's usually my question when it comes to these logistics cruisers. 220 for the sellers, 210 million for the buyers. I'd have some more patience, but again, look at the last 24 hours. More than half a front page here coming in. That's actually quite a lot of them. This might have more momentum, something to keep a lookout for. The Heretic went up to 80 million ISK and seems to be hesitating at that point, and it's basically the same thing. It's because there's not enough being brought to the market that we are seeing an increased price. So the sellers are mostly dictating the price, that is true. But from time to time you can get lucky when someone is impatient, and here we get 77.5 million for the first sellers, but the buyers are down to 64 million. They're only very begrudgingly willing to up that price a little bit from the 62 million that I think we saw, like, let's say a month ago or so, when we were really hitting rock bottom. But yeah, it's the sellers that are dictating the price most of the time. I do think you can grab some cheap Heretics still at this point, as a result, what's usually happening on an increased price is that the margin between sellers and buyers opens up, and eventually that tends to close down on more supplies. Next up here we've got the Hound, back under pressure as well, pretty much the same thing. I tried to make that trade, but I failed. I think I was a little bit too greedy with my sell price. 28.4 for the sellers and 25.5 for the buyers, with 156 of them coming in here. Is going to keep this pretty stable for now, I think, but it is definitely very cheap, especially on the buyer side. Next up we've got the Ishtar, 1-year low point, and that is very nice, I think, for people that want to grab and fly some Ishtars. 218 million for the sellers, 210 million for the buyers. Even speculating on a Tech 2 ship. I think that trying to grab an Ishtar, sure, it's a bit more expensive. It's more than 200 million ISK, granted. But look at this chart though. 1 year low point. This ought to be very cheap, and at the right time, if you can sell this, imagine that for 350 million ISK. This would be a very good purchase. Next up, we've got the Manticore. After a bit of a bubble happening here, up to 35 million ISK. We're back down. Same thing, I think. Increased price is opening up the margin. Sellers are going up in price, but buyers are staying the same. More supply comes in, trying to take advantage of that opportunity, and we drive the price back down, this time to less than 30 million ISK, 30 million for the sellers and 29 million for the buyers. And basically, I think the buyers have stayed at that 29 million for the whole ordeal here. Very interesting situation in my opinion. Potentially, with some right timing, you can make some ISK in this market. The Munin, same story here, back to a 1 year low point, selling for 219 million. Buyers are at 206 million ISK. That is pretty damn cheap. Nemesis, this one actually had a triple jump up to 32 million or something like that, I think. Yeah, 32.5 after going to a really low point of less than 25 million ISK on average. That was not bad. And this is where you can make some ISK, of course. Is back under pressure. 27 for the sellers, 26 for the buyers. We'll have to see which side wins out. If you'd be buying now, you're taking a bit of a gamble, so I wouldn't. I would actually be looking at these 1 year low points for these types of investment at this point. But you can see here, this is one of those really where you could have made a nice trade. On Neros though, volumes are not enough and is basically flat at 200 million ISK, so that's one that maybe I should skip at this point. The Purifier is right in its increased price, up to 40 million ISK all of a sudden. Jesus, and we could have bought these easily for 26, 27 like half a year ago, but below 30 million, we had plenty of opportunities for those, and it's again the sellers that are not showing up, and a bit of a relisting. 39.5 million for the sellers, 32 million for the buyers. The margin is staying up there though. They are only up 3 million. So here, sell opportunity in the Purifier if you bought low enough. Let's take a quick look. Purifier, and no, unless I'm trying to sell. So I did add an extra folder for me. No, I'm not. I'm only trying to sell consumer electronics and nuclear reactors at this point. Alright, then we get the Saber staying well below average again. At least it's coming away from that 65 million mark, which was pretty low. But the buyers, they're saying no. 64 million for the buyers, 68.5 million for the sellers. Well below average. And the buyers, yeah, are staying below the entire chart. Scimitar is also obviously pretty low at this point. 213 million for the sellers, 200.6 million for the buyers. And now we finally have the Stiletto that is also finally cracking under the pressure now, well below 30 million ISK, 28 for the sellers and 26.4 for the buyers, and the lack of buyers is starting to show up here as well. This, if you're looking for a frigate investment, definitely don't buy a dozen of these because it's only an interceptor, but this could actually be one to try and grab at least a couple of ships now that we're also trading at this low point, especially on the buyers. So yeah, the Tech 2 market, very interesting. You do need a bit more of a horizon at the moment because of the general pressure in the market, and it is a bit of a gamble, but you do see from at least some of these charts that from time to time you have that volatility, you have those sell opportunities, so you can actively trade in the Tech 2 market. Moving on to the Tech 3 market, coming in at 42.40. Like that. Let's go take a look at these. Here is the Confessor after reaching 42.5 million is going back down. Are we below 40 million for the sellers? Nope, 41 million for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers. Looking at the volumes, it's a decent amount in the last 24 hours, between 40, 20, 10. That's actually okay in volumes for one that is going down in price a little bit, so nothing too special there. The Hecate, same thing, went up to 47.5 million, is working its way back down towards 40 million ISK. 42 for the sellers, 38 for the buyers. Volumes here 23, 29. quite a few in the last 24 hours, granted, another 80 and another 50 here, but keep in mind, where do we come from? Almost 50 million ISK for this ship, so that was obviously the most expensive one. And this was a bit what I predicted like 2 weeks ago. I think you're gonna see more production take advantage of these higher prices, and this is where those volumes are at. But the good news is 80, 50, 50. This is not 200, 400, which are numbers that we've seen before when we were clearly overproducing these ships. So this is back towards the 40 million range, which is normal. We might see the volumes drop off a little bit at this point. We'll see if there's other opportunities. For instance, in the Jackdaw, nope, that was under pressure as well, but landing at 40 million as well. 40 million for the sellers, 38 for the buyers. And here we get 19, 17, 30. Again, a bit more coming in, but because we don't come from such a high recent price, right? In the last couple of weeks, we've been below 45 million. You can see that in the last 24 hours, we don't have that much fresh supply. So this has the time now to be absorbed by the market. You can clearly see that the really big ones are either up in price or already absorbed by the market. And as a result here, we're flat at 40 million with a decent availability. And finally, we've got this Vapel that is trying to get to 40 million, not succeeding at the tail end, so we definitely have some extra supply coming in. But here, look at that, we've got one seller of 71 coming in at 38 million ISK, buyers are at 37 million ISK, and then new supply, nope, because it's by far the cheapest one. So this is still very much a healthy market response. Sure, we're seeing a lot more ships on the market all of a sudden, but we also had far greater prices not that long ago. So this is quite normal. I wouldn't panic about these corrections. 40 million is the normal price. Give this a little bit of time, and we'll be back to better prices and higher prices quite soon. I don't expect a complete crash basically in the tactical destroyer market. Moving on to the cruisers, we have the Legion also recovering a little bit, heading back for more than 180 million, 183 for the sellers, 165 for the buyers. The last 24 hours, full front page, between only 15 and 10 here. I am again not too worried. These volumes actually look like quite okay and quite welcome, because we were struggling with very low supplies, and in my opinion with markets that would easily be manipulated. At this point with this, it's definitely not oversupplied, but it's a little bit more available. Loki continuing the decline, way under 200 million at this point, 176 for the sellers, 171 for the buyers. Availability, again, nothing too crazy, so this is definitely a pretty good price, below average I would say, if you've dreamed of flying one of the rebalanced Lokis, which you know, has like, I think it's armor and, let's see here, roll bonuses. I think it basically has potentially both an armor and a shield tank at the same time, so it was like definitely the most popular one up to this point. I'm not sure why this price is declining this much on not that many new ships, but yeah, if you want a cheaper Loki than we've seen basically the whole year, this is your time to grab one. Proteus also under pressure a little bit, selling for 166 and buyers coming in at 141. Availability, again, last 24 hours, bit over half a page, 22, 10, 10. The rest is definitely low in volume, so this is quite doable for the market. And the Tengu showing a bit of pressure at the tail end here as well. Less than 170 for a Tengu, that's actually pretty cheap as well, 155. And then you get 29 and 27. Bit more in the last 24 hours, but showing more ships on the market I think is actually good news. And well, we're talking below average prices for Tengu, Proteus and Loki at this point. So if you're interested in a Tech 3 cruiser, especially for using it yourself, then you can definitely try to grab one at this point. When it comes to speculation, I'd be very careful. The Loki though is clearly below almost the entire chart. You could probably consider that. So the Tech 3 market, I'm still not seeing signs of major oversupply. I am seeing this as, especially in the destroyer market, a pretty logical, healthy market where higher prices drive more production, which then brings the prices back down a little bit on more supplies, and then gives a little bit of breathing room to some of the other ones who then go back up in price. So this to me looks like a pretty decent and well-functioning market with, well, it has opportunities on all sides at this point. We are definitely under pressure on most of the cruisers, so you can just grab one if you want to, and then perhaps wait for some volatility, some sell opportunities or something like that. And for producers in general, I think they have their margins as well from time to time. Look at the Confessor here, 42 million, but then especially the Hecate about 45, and the Jackdaw also here and there some pretty nice margins. So overall, pretty decent tech tree market in my opinion. Then we're gonna move on to the extra product for this week. It's gonna be the Gecko. Let's say 49 minutes because I'll talk a little bit about my market activities as well. So let's start with the Gecko. It's one that I have like 5 or 6 of, I think, as a fight against inflation. And look at that, we did see a bottom in January, less than 85 million is, but now we're up to 100 million pretty much. Yep, 100 to 103 million for the first sellers, 93.5 million for the buyers. And so, do I have a ticker on my purchase? Gecko? No, unfortunately, I made it. I made that purchase a long time ago, before I even started keeping up with all of this. The Gecko is a very interesting and unique drone in EVE Online. It can basically have the same function as Plex, except which I would consider to be a protection against inflation, except that as long as CCP doesn't do anything drastic, you can't produce more geckos. So this is something that will only have a diminishing supply as they get destroyed by being used in the game. They're incredibly useful and good drones, and they are one of these unique items where it's not possible for the player base to go out there and find geckos or find gecko blueprints or anything like that unless CCP does something very special. They usually do that as a reward. So the next anniversary for EVE Online is coming next month. We'll see. But as long as there are no Gecko announcements there, I think that we're looking good to buy and hold these guys for a long time, looking at this as your protection against inflation. And so for now, for me, for my geckos that I've bought, I think I bought them for definitely less than 90. I'm not sure exactly how much I bought them for anymore, but it's looking pretty good. These are definitely increasing my total value at this point, and I'm gonna keep them. I think that I would rather wait for a dip and buy more geckos than start to sell them at this point. Just hold on to these babies. They are a bit like gold in EVE Online, in that you can't just produce more of these, unlike Plex, which can be brought into the game by being bought with real life money. So very interesting, good, and right now we are in a pretty good 1, 2, 3, 4 months for the Gecko, going up from 85 million to above 100 million ISK at this point. Let's hope it continues. I want to see a nice year of increased prices. Maybe if we reach some crazy high points of like 120, 130 million ISK or something like that, that's when I'll consider selling my geckos. But for now, I'm holding on to these little gold bars in heavy attack drone form. And then let's also show you guys the ticker here. You can see that I've been trying to buy some more stuff as well. I am basically trying to be a bit more active in the trading market as well. Some of the things that I'm trying to do is grab some munitions, some Tech 2 munitions. Why is that? If I'm not mistaken, I'm actually not entirely sure about this, but I read somewhere that CCP is planning to allow faction guns and weapon modules to use Tech 2 ammo. So I am trying to find some really cheap ones and trying to basically be ready for that eventuality. It should increase demand, so it should increase prices as well. Let's see, that's an old one, so advanced move materials, I'm definitely trying to grab some cheap ones of those as well. Isotopes is an investment that I've made a while ago that hasn't paid off just yet. It's very flat, so you can still join me in that investment if you want to. Hound 27 is that one that I'm trying to sell. Let's take a quick look at that. 37, yeah, that's gonna be my Hound sell order, so I should just move that to my trying to sell folder. Isotopes again, not recovering. So also some rage missile. Ooh, that's kind of crazy. So I'll try to buy some for 72 ISK. Now they're selling for 149. And is this my order? We'll see. If it is, I definitely grabbed some already. So we're ready to make a quick Twitch trade with 100% profit potentially in the Inferno Rage Heavy Missiles. So yeah, Tick 2 ammo, definitely something that I'm gonna take a look at and try to grab some cheap stuff in, because I think that this could be very interesting. Old purchase, as I've said, Tick 2 ammo. Nano factories, I saw this downtrend, so I'm trying to grab some for very cheap, 920. Nano factories, 920. Well, I don't really see. Oh, there it is. No, actually, I think I tried more than that. Well, we'll have to see. These are some of the investments that I've been trying to make. I think more on that on videos within the week. If I find some more interesting stuff like the Tech 1 rigs, then we've got the phenolic composites, 1900s. And some PI as well. So last week I also went through some PI to take a look at that. And synthetic oil, you can clearly see that we're at a 1-year low point. So I'm trying to grab that for 6,850, well below 7,000 ISK. Yukomi superconductors, same thing. Look at that drop off. So trying to grab those for 52k, should still be below the entire chart. I think that that's gonna be a good purchase. Maybe even short term. And then the water-cooled CPUs, look at that downtrend as well. And I'm actually trying to buy these for 6,900 ISK, well below the entire chart again. So this is something that I'm gonna try to do a bit more of as well. I think it's very interesting. At the moment though, I'm mostly buying stuff and I'm not selling too much. On the other hand, I should show this to you guys as well. From the video from the capacitor control circuits, I bought and sold them. Bought them for 7,050 and sold them for 7,050,000 ISK and sold them for 7.8 million ISK. Made a profit on that trade, and I did this one within 24 hours. Now, I only did this with a couple of capacitor control circuits. You don't want to spook the market too much or try with too big volumes. That's definitely something that I'm trying to learn right now, to find the right volumes. But at the moment I'm always edging for the low points, and that's well, has driven the price up. Competition is back in this market up to 7.4 million ISK, and then we're at 8 million for the sellers. That's way less of a margin, a bit harder to make good trades on. So we're gonna leave that behind, but I made a successful trade here with, well, that's more than 10% profit on a medium capacitor control circuit 2 trade. I'm very happy that I found that while taking a look at the rigs. That's an old trade, and then construction blocks triggered as well. Bought for less than 10,000 ISK and of course sold for almost 12,000 ISK, and potentially we could have gotten more, but I'm very happy with like a 1900 profit on a 10,000 ISK buy. That's almost 20%, definitely 15-16% on that trade as well. And yeah, I'm a bit more active in Jita at the moment. I did take someone's advice for my other purchases. Definitely go to perimeter, put up your buy order with a 1 jump range. It's a massive difference with the 2% sales tax. For me it's actually still 2.46%, because I don't have the rep with Caldari Navy, which I'm also gonna work on a little bit while I spend some more time in Jita. So there you go, guys. I definitely have plans for more trading, more market stuff in general. Hope you guys like it. For now, that's gonna be it for this EVE Talk. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.